The CEO's grandma cried after seeing the shy receptionist's necklace. What she said made him realize she was the one. Everyone in the room stopped breathing when the CEO's grandmother burst into tears. Her eyes weren't on the board members, the contracts, or even on her grandson. They were locked on the shy receptionist's silver necklace, the same one she claimed had been destroyed 50 years ago. And with a trembling voice, she whispered, "Where did you get that?" Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now let's get back to the story. The silence hit the room like a drop pin on marble. "I need to sit down," Eleanor Whitmore whispered, her voice trembling as she clutched her silk scarf to her chest. Every head in the executive floor reception area turned at once. Claire Bennett froze behind the reception desk, her hand still on the phone, blinking as if she'd misheard. The CEO's maternal grandmother, the elegant, unshakable Eleanor Whitmore, had stopped mid-step on her surprise visit to Colin Blackstone and was now trembling, her gaze locked on Claire's necklace. It was just a silver pendant, a small oval locket no larger than a thumbprint. Claire wore it every day. She hardly thought about it. But now, under the fluorescent lights and 100 eyes, that simple necklace had become the center of gravity in the room. Adrian Cole, standing tall in the center of the floor with his tablet in hand, turned toward the disturbance, his jaw tightened, eyes narrowing as he moved swiftly to his grandmother's side. "What happened?" His voice, usually so composed, now carried a sharp undertone, protective, alarmed. Eleanor didn't answer. She stared at Claire as if seeing a ghost. Claire stood, her legs stiff beneath her, the air pulled from her lungs. She started, voice barely above a whisper. Is something wrong?" Eleanor took a step closer. As if drawn by an invisible thread, she reached out with one trembling hand and touched the pendant gently. Claire flinched, but didn't pull away. "Where did you get this?" Eleanor's voice cracked mid-sentence, fragile and raw. Claire's eyes darted to Adrian, whose frown deepened. It was my mother's," Claire said quietly. "She gave it to me when I turned 18. She said it was old family jewelry. I never really knew much about it. She passed away shortly after." Eleanor's breath hitched. "The engraving on the base, it's identical. I photographed it myself before the lawyers ordered its destruction." A single tear rolled down Eleanor's cheek. The room was still. You could hear the elevator ding 3 floors up. Adrian looked between the two women, then signaled discreetly to an assistant. "Everyone, take a short break," he said. "We'll reconvene in 20, back in the boardroom." The office hesitated for half a beat before beginning to disperse, whispering softly like waves receding from shore. He guided his grandmother into the nearest meeting room, a sleek glass enclosure just behind reception. Claire remained standing, staring at her necklace, like it had turned to fire. Just before the door shut, Eleanor looked back and said softly, "Claire, would you join us?" Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. She nodded. She followed them in silence. As the door clicked shut behind her, the world seemed to grow distant, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. The room was warm. Soft gray chairs circled a walnut table. Eleanor sat gently. Her scarf pooled on her lap. Adrian stood beside her, watching Claire with an unreadable expression. "Please," Eleanor said, gesturing to the seat across from her. "Sit." Claire obeyed. For a long moment, Eleanor simply looked at her. Then she smiled faintly through her tears. "I haven't seen that necklace in nearly 50 years, she said. "Not since your grandmother wore it." Claire blinked. "My grandmother?" Eleanor nodded. "Margaret Belmont. That was her name before she married. She worked for my husband, Thomas Whitmore, in the late 60s. She was his assistant, bright, sweet, with eyes just like yours." Claire opened her mouth, but no words came. She didn't know much about her grandmother, just that she'd died young, and there had been some family estrangement no one talked about. Eleanor's hands folded over her scarf. There was a story, one the family buried to protect reputations. But seeing that necklace, it's like a key turned in a door I'd forgotten even existed. Adrian finally spoke. "Are you saying Claire is related to us?" Eleanor shook her head slowly. "Not by blood, but perhaps by truth, by pain. There's something I need to say to both of you. But first—" She turned to Claire, her voice softer now. "Will you have a cup of tea with me?" Claire nodded, numb. Adrian stepped out briefly and returned moments later with 3 mugs from the executive kitchen, mismatched and steaming. He handed one to Claire without a word. Their fingers brushed. He didn't pull away immediately. Small, but she felt it. Eleanor sipped hers first. She smiled, barely. "Chamomile. The only thing my nerves will tolerate these days." Claire stared at the rising steam. "My mother used to say the same." They sat in a quiet triangle, the powerful CEO, the elegant matriarch, and the receptionist who no longer knew who she was. "I don't want to say more until I've confirmed it," Eleanor said at last, "but I believe your grandmother was wronged, and if I'm right, Claire, you deserve to know everything." Claire set her tea down carefully, hands trembling. Adrian's expression had softened, the cool, polished executive exterior cracking just a little. He leaned forward. "If something happened in this company's past that hurt your family," he said carefully, "we'll make it right." Claire nodded slowly. "I don't want anything. I never knew why there was always this silence in my family. Like we weren't supposed to ask." Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Sometimes silence isn't protection. It's punishment dressed up as duty." Just then, Adrian's phone buzzed with a message. He glanced down, then stood abruptly. "We've got a problem," he said tightly, eyes flicking toward the glass wall. "Someone took a photo of this from outside." Claire's stomach turned. Eleanor looked up. "A photo of what?" Adrian's gaze was already on his screen. He turned it toward them. "It's on social media, captioned, 'CEO's grandmother cries over receptionist's necklace, secret affair from the past.'" Claire's face went pale. She reached for the mug again, fingers shaking slightly. But Eleanor just exhaled and said quietly, "Well, let them talk. The truth hasn't even started speaking yet." The photo was spreading faster than wildfire. By the time Adrian escorted Claire and Eleanor down the side hallway to his private office, 2 more staffers had forwarded him the post. One had even attached an emoji, the shocked face kind. Claire noticed and wished she hadn't. Adrian's office was quiet, cool, and mercifully windowless. The heavy wooden door closed behind them with a soft click, like the world had been muted, but the damage still buzzed in Claire's ears. Eleanor sat carefully on the velvet-cushioned bench near the bookshelf, her fingers smoothing the fabric of her gown. Claire hovered near the door, uncertain whether to stay, sit, or simply vanish. Adrian placed his phone on the desk and ran a hand through his hair, a rare break in his composed appearance. "Well," he said, his voice low. That got out of hand quickly. Eleanor offered a faint smile. "You mean the photo, or the past finally catching up?" He glanced at Claire. "Both." Claire looked down, her hand instinctively going to the necklace again. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I didn't even know what this necklace meant until 5 minutes ago." "You didn't cause anything," Adrian said gently. Then added with a touch of dry humor, "My family's the one leaking drama into the corporate bloodstream." Claire almost smiled. Almost. But her fingers kept twisting the chain at her collarbone. "People are going to think," she began, "that you're having an affair with me and somehow shattered my grandmother's heart?" Adrian raised an eyebrow. "They'll move on. They always do." But Eleanor was watching Claire carefully, and in that moment, she said something soft that no one expected. "Margaret used to twist her necklace like that, too, when she was nervous." Claire's hand froze. Adrian sat down across from them, one leg crossed over the other, and exhaled slowly. I think we need to get ahead of this. Eleanor turned to him. You're thinking a statement. Exactly, a quiet one. Not a scandal, something respectful, personal. From you, actually. Claire blinked. From her? Adrian nodded. People adore Eleanor. They listen to her. If she says this was a moment of personal memory, nothing more, they'll back off. No one will want to push her. Eleanor raised a brow. You're asking me to lie. Adrian paused. Not lie, just simplify, until we know more. Claire watched them both. For a moment she felt like furniture in the room, useful, but voiceless. Then Eleanor turned and did something unexpected. She reached into her clutch, pulled out a tiny embroidered handkerchief, and carefully dried her cheeks. Then she patted the space on the bench beside her. Come sit, Claire. Claire hesitated, then crossed the room slowly and sat down. The distance between her and Eleanor closed by more than just inches. I'd rather not simplify anything, Eleanor said softly, eyes never leaving Claire's. This company has been built on strength and truth. If that includes facing something painful, then so be it. Claire's throat tightened. I don't want anything from this, not money, not attention. I want to understand why this necklace makes you cry. Eleanor nodded slowly. And I want to explain, but to do that I need time. A day, maybe two. There are letters, record poem, and one particular photo album I thought I'd thrown away years ago, but I think it's time to open it. Adrian stood. Then we wait. Claire glanced up at him. People already have theories. They'll keep building their own story while we say nothing. He nodded. That's why I'll say something today. Eleanor's lips quirked. You? Claire blinked. What will you say? Adrian walked over to the built-in coffee machine, opened a cabinet, and began pulling down mugs. That this was a moment of family memory, sparked by a shared heirloom. And the woman wearing it is under my personal protection until further notice. Claire's mouth fell slightly open. That sounds medieval. He gave her a quick sideways glance. That's the best kind of PR, nostalgic and vague. Despite herself, Claire let out a soft laugh. So I'm being knighted? Adrian handed her a mug. At the very least, escorted away from the dragons. He handed Eleanor a cup as well, and they all sat in a strange triangle again. This time with the warmth of fresh coffee threading between them. Claire held the mug close, inhaling the rich scent. It was a small thing, but grounding, like the first breath after a wave passed. I was never meant to be part of anything this grand, she said quietly, half to herself. You're not, Eleanor said. You already were. Claire blinked. What do you mean? Eleanor looked at the necklace again. That piece belonged to a woman who was shamed quietly, not because she did anything wrong, but because she wasn't rich or powerful, because someone else decided her name wasn't worth protecting. Adrian stiffened slightly. Who? Eleanor gave him a long, tired look. Your grandfather. The room fell still. Adrian lowered his mug. Claire felt the necklace grow heavier against her skin. But that's a story for another day, Eleanor said, voice quieter now, and one I intend to tell properly. Adrian turned back toward his desk, reaching for his phone to begin drafting his statement. But before he could unlock the screen, it buzzed in his hand. Another message. He glanced at it, brow furrowing, then tapped to open. Claire noticed the shift in his posture immediately. What is it? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, he looked up at them both. It's not just gossip anymore, he said. Someone just posted a second photo. From last year. Of you, Claire, in the lobby, wearing the necklace. Claire's pulse quickened. So? Adrian tilted the phone so she could see the screen. Look at the caption. It read, She's been planning this for months. Claire stared at the screen, heart climbing up her throat. She's been planning this for months? The photo was grainy, taken from the second-floor mezzanine, but clearly showed her behind the reception desk, glancing down at her keyboard, wearing the very same necklace. Her cardigan was buttoned, hair pinned up, a day like any other. Except now, twisted through the lens of gossip, it looked like a setup. "She's not some schemer," Eleanor said firmly, voice sharp enough to cut through tension. "Who even posted that?" Adrian didn't answer right away. He was already tapping into the account, a throwaway gossip profile with no clear origin. The kind that fed on scandal like a parasite. No name, no real followers, but it was gaining traction fast. Claire sank into the chair, her fingers curling tightly around the arms. "Is this what it's like when rumors start?" Adrian looked up. "You don't deserve this." "That doesn't stop it from happening." He opened his mouth to reply, but just then, a soft knock broke the silence. 3 taps. Polite. Too polite. A second later, the door cracked open, and a cheerful voice chimed, "Hope I'm not interrupting anything scandalous." It was Nina, Adrian's executive assistant. Late 30s, bold lipstick, eyes that missed nothing. She stepped in with a tray of coffee cups and 2 small paper bags. "I figured the building might collapse if I didn't bring in caffeine and carbs." Claire blinked. "You brought pastries?" "Technically bribes, but yes." Nina set everything down on the coffee table. "Chamomile for Miss Whitmore, dark roast for the brooding CEO, and a mystery latte for our receptionist-turned-internet icon." Claire flushed. "That's not funny." "No, it's not. But if we don't laugh a little, we cry a lot. And my mascara's not waterproof." Adrian gave her a flat look, but took the coffee anyway. "Close the door on your way out." Nina winked at Claire. "If anyone asks, you fainted dramatically and were revived by a cinnamon roll. It's trending now." As the door clicked shut behind her, Claire let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "She's intense," she murmured. "She's family," Adrian replied, "in the way corporate people sometimes are." Claire reached for one of the small paper bags and opened it slowly. Inside was a lemon tart, her favorite, from the bakery across the street. She hadn't told anyone that. Her eyes lifted to Adrian. He just sipped his coffee and looked out the windowless wall, like he hadn't just read her soul on a pastry menu. Later, when Eleanor excused herself to make a phone call in private, Claire and Adrian remained in the office together. The silence felt different now, less heavy but no less full. Claire watched him scroll through his phone, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You really believe I didn't do this?" she said quietly. He looked up. "Yes. Even though it's so easy to assume I did." He didn't answer right away. Then he set the phone down and leaned forward slightly. "Claire, I've seen people fake things, chase power, try to climb using someone else's grief. I know what that looks like, and it's not you." Her breath caught slightly in her chest. "But this necklace," she said, touching it again, "it's like a magnet for pain." Adrian's eyes softened. Or for truth. There was a long pause. Then, quite suddenly, Claire let out a tiny laugh. Adrian raised an eyebrow. She covered her mouth. "Sorry, I was just thinking, last week my biggest worry was whether the new fern in the lobby was dying. Now I'm part of a decades-old family mystery, and people think I'm your secret lover." Adrian let out a surprised chuckle. "Well, if the fern dies, we're all doomed." Claire laughed again, and for a moment the tension cracked just enough for something lighter to slip through. Then a soft knock came again. Not Nina this time. Quieter. Slower. Adrian stood and opened the door. A man in his 60s stood there, tall. Silver hair and eyes too sharp to be friendly. "Philip," Adrian's voice cooled. "What are you doing here?" Philip Cole was Adrian's paternal uncle, the older brother of Adrian's late father, Daniel Cole. "I saw the photo," the man said, stepping in without invitation, "and I recognized the necklace." Claire stood instinctively. Eleanor had just returned, her phone forgotten in her hand. Her expression changed the moment she saw the visitor. "Philip Cole," she said, flat and dry. "Of course you'd come slithering out the moment the pass caught fire." Philip's gaze moved to Claire, unreadable. "You look just like her," he said. But we all know that necklace doesn't belong to you." Claire's voice came before she even knew she was speaking. "I'm not here to steal anything." "No," Philip replied, "but you are about to learn that not everyone wants the truth to come out." Philip Cole closed the door behind him like he owned the room, as if walking into the company where his late brother, Daniel Cole, once served as CEO, still gave him some shadow of control. Claire could feel the shift in energy the moment he stepped in. Eleanor stiffened. Adrian's jaw tensed. Philip walked past them and looked straight at the necklace again. "That locket was part of a set," he said. "The bracelet was sold years ago, under less delicate circumstances, but the locket, that was supposed to be destroyed." "Destroyed?" Claire echoed, confused. "By legal order," Philip added, "to prevent any confusion." Eleanor gave a soft, disbelieving laugh. "Is that what you called it? Legal clarity? You mean erasing a woman's dignity?" Philip's gaze didn't shift. "We had to protect the family name. Margaret Belmont made her choices, painful as they were." Claire stood, her voice more certain this time. "What choices?" Philip's lips pressed together, reluctant, but Eleanor answered. She fell in love with the wrong man, trusted him, and when he didn't defend her, she left quietly, shamed, with nothing but that necklace and her pride. Adrian narrowed his eyes. "My grandfather." Philip said nothing. Claire touched the locket again. "So he betrayed her?" "He didn't marry her," Eleanor said flatly. "He married money." A heavy silence filled the room. Adrian stepped beside Claire. "If this is true, then we owe her descendants, Claire, more than silence and shame." Philip folded his arms. "You don't know what you're stepping into, Adrian." "No," Adrian said, his voice low and steady. "But I know who I am." Philip turned toward the door, but not before dropping one last dagger. "That necklace doesn't change your place, Miss Bennet. It never did." Claire didn't respond, but she didn't flinch either. He left with the same quiet arrogance he arrived with. When the door clicked shut again, Eleanor let out a long, weary breath and sat down. "Apologies," she said, glancing at Claire. "He's always thought himself the gatekeeper of family secrets, but he never understood the weight of the ones he locked away." Claire sat slowly, her fingers wrapped around the mug still sitting on the table. Cold now, but grounding. "I need to know everything," she said. "Not guesses, not half-memories. The whole truth." Adrian pulled out a chair and joined her at the table. "Then we start now," he said. "But first, let's eat something, all of us." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Adrian Cole, offering food before files. There's hope for you yet." He went to the door and called for Nina. "Order lunch?" "Please. Sandwiches, simple, and we'll need the 1971 archives from storage." Nina, from behind the door, replied, "Sandwiches, secrets, and soul-crushing timelines. Got it." An hour later, a tray of toasted sandwiches arrived, along with 2 dusty boxes of old photo files and company documents. They ate quietly, roast beef for Adrian, cucumber and dill for Eleanor, and a warm turkey and cranberry one for Claire. The food felt oddly comforting. A pause in the storm, a reminder of something simple in the middle of something impossible. As they ate, Eleanor opened one of the boxes. She pulled out a stack of old black and white photographs bound in twine. Claire leaned in, brushing crumbs from her fingers. "That's her," Eleanor said softly, holding up a photo. A young woman, no older than 25, stood beside an office desk, her smile both hopeful and unsure. Her hair was curled gently at the shoulders. Around her neck, unmistakable, was the same silver locket Claire wore now. "She's beautiful," Claire whispered, "and she looks like she doesn't know what's about to happen." "She didn't," Eleanor murmured. "We were never told what happened. She was suddenly gone." Adrian studied the photo. "What's this name written on the back?" Claire turned the photo over. A name was scribbled in fading ink. "T. Whitmore, plus M.B. Gus Scepter 1971. T. Whitmore, Adrian said aloud. That's my husband, Eleanor confirmed. Claire stared at the initials. So this confirms it? It confirms they were close, Eleanor said. But I think there's more. There were letters Margaret used to write. I read one once, hidden in a book she left behind. Adrian stood, heading toward a stack of files in the corner. Let's check everything. They spent the next hour combing through photographs, holiday cards, and even a newsletter that referenced a holiday retreat. One Margaret was meant to attend, but never did. Claire held one photo longer than the others. It showed a group of employees posing at a company picnic. Everyone smiling. One man, however, stood at the edge, turned halfway toward a young woman whose face had been scratched out with pen. Claire looked closer. She knew that chin. T. Whitmore, she whispered. Just then Nina peeked in again, holding her phone. Not to panic anyone, she said, but we just got a media request for a quote about the heirloom girl. Apparently someone's claiming Claire is after the company shares. Claire's face flushed. What? Eleanor's voice turned ice cold. Let me guess. That rumor came from someone with a silver tongue and a dead heart. Adrian took the photo from Claire's hands. No one's getting ahead of this but us. But Claire wasn't looking at the phone anymore. She was staring at the edge of the photo, at a faint, almost hidden signature. There, half buried beneath the fold, was a handwritten note. For my little girl, should the world turn cruel. Her breath hitched. She had a daughter, Claire said softly. Eleanor turned, eyes wide. She did? Claire looked up, voice steady now. Yes, and I think that daughter was my mother. Claire had never seen her name in bold font before. But there it was, right on the printed news article Nina tossed onto Adrian's desk the next morning. Claire Bennett, secret heir or clever imposter? Her stomach clenched as she skimmed the piece. A faceless source from within the company had given them just enough to spin. The locket, Eleanor's reaction. And now, a whisper that Claire was angling for a legal claim. I'm not, she said aloud, setting the paper down. I don't even know what I'm claiming. Adrian, pacing near the window, ran a hand through his hair. You're not claiming anything, but someone wants people to believe you are. Claire looked at Eleanor, who sat with her legs elegantly crossed, unmoved by the noise. This is Philip, she said. He's always hated the idea that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Adrian's voice was calm, but firm. We're not letting this spiral. Eleanor smiled faintly. You'll forgive me, dear, but it already has. Claire stood. If they're going to call me names, I'd like to at least have something worth defending. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning, she said, with a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I want to see Margaret's letters, the ones you said she left behind. Eleanor paused, surprised. And then, almost proudly, she nodded. They're at my home, in a sewing box, buried under 30 years of knitting needles and guilt. Claire looked at Adrian. Can we go? He didn't hesitate. I'll drive. They arrived at Eleanor's townhouse just after noon, a charming 2-story home lined with hydrangeas and ivy, tucked quietly behind a stone gate. Inside it smelled like lavender, lemon oil, and the comforting passage of time. Eleanor disappeared into the study while Adrian followed Claire into the sunlit kitchen. I should warn you, she said, tying her hair back with a rubber band from her wrist. This part of the story might include spaghetti and paper plates. He raised a brow. Sounds dangerously humble. Claire smiled. It was my mom's go-to when things felt too big, like the world was spinning too fast. Spaghetti and butter, no sauce, just a little salt. That was her way of slowing down. Adrian leaned on the counter. And yours? Claire opened the pantry. Same, with cinnamon toast for dessert. He chuckled, watching her pull out an old saucepan. I should have guessed you'd be a carbs and comfort girl. And you? She asked, glancing back. Control, he replied honestly. When things spin out, I try to out-organize them. Claire stirred the pasta in silence for a moment. Then, I think I prefer butter. They ate at the kitchen table. No napkins, no pretense, just two people and a plate of noodles that tasted far better than they had any right to. Adrian took a bite, smiled faintly. Don't tell the shareholders, but this might be better than the executive dining floor. Claire laughed. If word gets out, I'm opening a food truck. Past lives and pasta. What do you think? I'd invest. The warmth in his voice settled something in her, something scared and uncertain. And for the first time since all this began, Claire let herself just be, not the receptionist, not the headline, just herself. Then Eleanor's voice echoed from the hallway. Found it. They followed her into a cozy sitting room filled with light. She held a blue tin sewing box, weathered and dented. And inside, folded carefully in a cloth napkin, were 3 letters and 1 photograph. Claire reached for the photo first. It showed Margaret sitting on a bench by a fountain, sunlight dancing through her auburn hair. In her lap, a tiny child, maybe 2 years old, with the same hazel eyes Claire saw in the mirror. That's my mother, she whispered. Eleanor nodded. Her name was Lucy, I believe. Claire swallowed hard. No one ever told me. They wouldn't have, Eleanor said gently. Her name was never written in the family tree. That was Philip's influence. He insisted what wasn't official didn't count. Adrian was reading the first letter. His expression changed with each line. She wrote this while she was pregnant, he said quietly. She didn't ask for anything, just said she hoped the baby would be brave. Claire's eyes burned. She was. My mother was the bravest person I ever knew. They sat in silence, each lost in a different ache. Bop. Then a knock came at the front door. Eleanor looked up. Expecting anyone? Adrian went to check. Claire heard low voices, then footsteps. He returned, holding a large cream envelope in one hand. He set it on the table, frowning. It's from Philip. Eleanor snorted. Of course it is. He wouldn't dare speak. So, he sends a letter. Adrian opened it carefully. Inside was a single typed page. Claire leaned over to read. Effective immediately, the Board of Coal and Blackstone requests a formal review of Claire Bennett's employment status, citing potential conflict of interest, reputational risk, and unapproved access to proprietary family information. Failed by Philip Cole, acting board liaison. Claire stared at it, her throat dry. They're trying to fire me, she said. Eleanor's eyes flashed. They'll regret it. Adrian took the letter and folded it slowly. They want a fight, he said. They've got one. But Claire wasn't looking at the letter anymore. She was staring at the photograph again, at something faint, barely visible, scribbled on the edge. A name. Thomas Whitmore, Jr. She looked up. There was a child. A second one. Adrian froze. Another. Claire held up the photo. Yes, and I think he's still alive. It started with a photo. The name, Thomas Whitmore, Jr., was written in rushed, half-faded ink along the edge of the fountain bench where Margaret had sat, cradling her daughter. Claire stared at it, her pulse pounding. If he was born after my mother, she said slowly, then Margaret didn't just leave with one child. She left pregnant. Eleanor sank onto the settee. Her hand pressed gently to her lips. She never told me, not even once. But that would explain why she vanished completely. Claire traced the writing in the photo with her thumb. What if he's still out there? Adrian was already one step ahead, pulling out his phone. There's no record of a Thomas Whitmore, Jr. in our family registry. Nothing on the shareholder list. Nothing in the archives. Claire looked at him. That doesn't mean he doesn't exist. No, Adrian said, glancing up. It means someone made sure he didn't. Back at the office the next morning, things were different. The reception desk, once Claire's quiet corner, felt like a stage. Whispers followed her down hallways, a few sympathetic glances, a few that weren't. But Claire didn't shrink. She walked in wearing the necklace, shoulders straight, expression calm, and passed Philip Cole in the elevator without a word. Eleanor had insisted on speaking to the board. Adrian backed it. But Claire asked to do it herself. "I don't need someone to speak for me anymore," she had said. "I need them to hear my voice." And that's exactly what she did. They gave her 5 minutes, 12 board members, polished suits, blank faces, Philip among them, smug behind his reading glasses. Claire stood in the center of the boardroom with the necklace resting just above her collarbone, the photo in one hand, a single page in the other, a printed copy of Margaret's letter. "My name is Claire Bennett," she said clearly. "I've worked at this company for 4 years. I've filed reports, brewed coffee, covered phones, and until 3 days ago I was invisible to most of you." A quiet shift in the room. Someone cleared their throat. She held up the letter. "This was written by Margaret Bellamont, my grandmother. She worked here too, until she didn't, because someone made sure her story disappeared." A pause. "I'm not here to make a claim. I'm not here to tear anything down. I'm here because she mattered, because truth matters." She placed the letter gently on the long table, next to a crystal paperweight. Philip reached for it, scanning quickly, his expression unreadable. Claire didn't wait. "I'm not going anywhere." "Fire me if you must. But this necklace," she held it up gently, "won't be erased a second time." And then she left. Adrian found her on the rooftop garden an hour later. "You stunned them," he said, handing her a paper bag. Claire peeked inside. "Grilled cheese? With sharp cheddar and tomato." "Don't say I'm not emotionally intelligent," she smiled, touched. "That's oddly perfect." They sat together on the bench near the potted lemon tree. It was quiet, the breeze soft and high above the city noise. "You said something in there," he said after a while. "That truth matters." Claire nodded. "It does." He looked at her for a long moment. "Even if it makes everything harder?" She met his eyes. "Especially then." He studied her. Not the shy receptionist anymore, but someone different, braver, anchored. And it did something to him, something he wasn't entirely ready to name. "Most people would have run," he said softly. "I'm tired of running," she replied, "and my mother never had the chance." A moment passed. Gentle, charged, quiet. Then Claire's phone buzzed in her cardigan pocket. She pulled it out and frowned. It was a text. From Nina. "Nina, your grilled cheese boy left his phone in the boardroom. I found it and accidentally texted his mom a fire emoji. You're welcome." Claire burst out laughing, covering her mouth. "He's never going to forgive us." Adrian leaned over to see the message and shook his head. "She'll probably assume we're engaged by Thursday." Later that evening, back in her apartment, Claire finally sat at her kitchen table and held the locket in her hand. She'd worn it her whole life, but she'd never really examined it. She ran her fingers along the edge, thinking. Then she saw it, a tiny notch on the underside. Curious, she pressed gently. The locket popped open. Not just the photo compartment, that part she knew, but beneath it, hidden in the silver backing, was a folded scrap of paper, so small, so thin, it looked like part of the design. Her hand shook as she pulled it out. There, in faint pencil, "If anything happens to me, find Nora. She will know where I left him." Claire's heart stopped. Nora? She didn't know a Nora, but maybe Eleanor did. She reached for her phone and paused, because just then another message popped up. "Unknown number. Stop digging. You won't like what you find next." Claire didn't sleep that night. She read and reread the note hidden inside the locket until the words blurred. "Find Nora. She will know where I left him." She tried calling Eleanor, but the line went straight to voicemail. Adrian offered to help trace the name through records, but Claire shook her head. "No," she said gently. "If Margaret trusted this person, I want to find her myself." By morning, she had a lead, a retirement community in Queens. There was a Nora Bell listed on the resident directory. Aged 83, Claire called. A nurse answered. She asked nervously but clearly if she could visit. To her surprise, the nurse said, "She doesn't get many visitors. I think she'd like that." The building was old, but clean, quiet, smelling faintly of lavender and lemon floor polish. Claire stepped off the elevator holding a paper bag with 2 scones and a thermos of black tea. Something to bring. Something to offer. When she walked into room 402, the woman inside looked up from a jigsaw puzzle with slow, clouded eyes. "Miss Bell?" Claire asked softly. The woman blinked, then smiled faintly. "I haven't been Miss in 50 years. Call me Nora." Claire took a breath. "My name is Claire Bennett. I believe you knew my grandmother, Margaret Bellamont." Something shifted behind Nora's eyes. Her hand slowly stopped moving the puzzle piece. She sat back in the chair. "That necklace," she said. Claire instinctively touched it. "You recognize it?" "Of course I do," Nora murmured. "I was there the day she got it. Her 21st birthday. I remember because she spilled soda on my shoes right before he gave it to her." Claire's eyes welled. "You were her friend?" "I was her sister," Nora said. "Not by blood, but by everything that matters." They sat together at a little table by the window. Nora took her tea without sugar and ate the scone slowly, eyes far away. "She was in love with him, you know," Nora said, "with Thomas Whitmore. He made her promises, marriage, a future. She believed every word." Claire listened quietly, her hands wrapped around her cup. "She found out she was pregnant after she left the company," Nora continued. "I was the only one who knew. She had your mother first. Lucy, born in 1972. Then, 2 years later, Thomas Jr., in 1974. Claire's voice cracked. "What happened to him?" "He was sick when he was born," Nora said softly. "Doctors said he wouldn't survive a year." Margaret didn't want to believe it. But she was alone. No family, no money, no name that anyone would protect. Claire reached out. "Did he?" Nora nodded. "He lived, barely. But Margaret was scared someone would try to take him. Or worse, that Philip or one of the others would pay to make it all disappear. So she gave him up." Claire's breath caught. "To who?" "A friend," Nora said. "A woman who'd lost her own baby. A woman who owed Margaret a kindness." Claire felt a heaviness settle in her chest. "Why didn't my mother ever tell me?" Nora looked at her, eyes suddenly sharp. "Because I asked her not to." Claire blinked. "You?" Nora nodded. "Your mother came to me when you were 10. She had found the same letter. She knew the truth. But I made her promise not to chase it." "Why?" "Because people were still watching back then," Nora said. "Philip still had power, and the moment someone looked too close, that boy's life would have been shattered." Claire stood reeling. "But I have to find him now." Nora didn't stop her. "Then promise me one thing. When you find him, don't drag him into your storm unless he chooses it." Claire nodded slowly. "I promise." Back at the office, Adrian was waiting. She walked straight into his office and closed the door. He looked up from a call, saw her face, and ended it mid-sentence. "Well?" he asked. She told him everything. He listened without interrupting, eyes unreadable, but locked on her. When she finished, he simply said, "You did it." Claire tilted her head. "I haven't done anything yet." "You followed your instincts," he said. "You chased something no one else would." "That's rare." She sat across from him, exhausted. "I don't know how to tell him," she said. "That his mother left him behind because she was scared of people like your uncle." Adrian leaned forward. "You'll find the words. You already carry her strength." Claire blinked. He said it so simply, as if it were obvious. Just then Nina burst in with a file and a sheepish grin. "Sorry to interrupt the brooding but tender eye contact, but HR needs a statement on Claire's job status. Apparently, the intern asked if she was the heir who broke the internet." Claire turned red. Adrian sighed. "Tell them she's officially under my protection." Nina raised an eyebrow. "So, knighted again?" Adrian didn't smile. "Put it in writing." That night Claire sat at her kitchen table, locket open beside her. She took out the hidden note again, and something new caught her eye. The paper was folded twice, but now, under the right light, she saw faint handwriting on the inside flap. Tiny, neat cursive, a name and an address. She leaned closer. Thomas Bell, 39 Spruce Avenue, Brookhaven. Whitmore Jr. had been registered and raised under the surname of his adoptive family, Bell. She sat back, heart pounding. He wasn't gone. He had just been hidden under her own family's name. Claire stood in front of the house at 39 Spruce Avenue, hands trembling slightly, her heart beating hard enough to hear. It was smaller than she expected. White siding, weather-worn porch, a wooden swing creaking gently in the wind. She glanced back at Adrian, who stood by the car watching. Not hovering, just present. "I can wait here," he said. Claire shook her head. "No, come with me." Together they walked up the steps. She hesitated, then knocked. A moment passed, then footsteps. The door opened. The man who stood there was in his early 50s, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark auburn hair streaked gray at the temples. His face was kind but lined, not from age, but from a life that had asked too much. "Yes?" he asked, his voice cautious but calm. Claire swallowed. "Are you Thomas Bell?" "I am." She reached into her coat pocket and held out the locket, open to the photo of Margaret. "My name is Claire Bennett," she said. "This woman was my grandmother, and I think she was your mother, too." For a second he didn't move, didn't breathe. Then he stepped back. "Come in." The house smelled like coffee and old wood, faint vanilla, something baked recently. Claire sat at the dining table. Adrian stood quietly by the window. Out of earshot, but within reach, Thomas sat across from her, staring at the photo. His hand shook as he touched the locket gently. "I have seen this picture," he said finally. "In a box. It was with a letter. The woman who raised me, she said it was from my real mother, but she didn't say much more. Just that I was loved and protected." Claire's voice trembled. "She was terrified of losing you." Thomas nodded slowly. "I grew up knowing I didn't quite belong, but I was never unloved." He looked at her. Really looked. "You have her eyes," he said softly. Claire smiled, the kind that came with tears. "You look like my mom. Her name was Lucy." His breath caught. "I didn't know her name." "She passed when I was 19, Claire said, "and she never told me about you, but she left me this." She touched the necklace, and it led me here. Thomas stood, went to a drawer, and returned with a small, folded envelope. "I kept this," he said. "It was with the photo. I've never opened it." Claire reached for it, then paused. "May I?" He nodded. Her fingers shook as she unfolded the paper. The handwriting was delicate, familiar. "My dearest boy, if you're reading this, I've gone where I can't protect you. But you were never a secret. You were a prayer. Find your sister when it's safe. Her name is Lucy, and tell her I forgave her. Tell her I knew she was just trying to protect you, too. My love always. Mama." Claire blinked through tears. She never hated her. Not for leaving the past buried. Not for keeping us apart. Thomas wiped his eyes. "She just loved us. That's all she ever did." Adrian eventually joined them at the table. Thomas brewed fresh coffee. Claire found herself laughing quietly when he pulled out 3 mismatched mugs, one of them shaped like a chicken. "Sorry," he said. "The dishwasher rebelled last week. These were the survivors." Claire smiled. "Honestly, I think it fits." They ate toast and leftover apple pie from the fridge, talked about small things, safe things, pie crusts and old books, shared glances that meant more than the words between them. At one point, Thomas leaned back and said, "I used to dream I had a sister, Isn't that strange?" Claire's voice was soft. "It's not strange. I used to dream someone out there knew who I was." He reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his. "Well," he said, "now we both know." Adrian watched the moment quietly. Claire didn't see the way he looked at her, how he saw strength where others had seen shyness, how he realized fully and finally that she wasn't changing into someone new. She was just becoming more of who she'd always been. Later, as they stepped out onto the porch to say goodbye, Thomas looked at Adrian for the first time with careful eyes. "You're the one helping her through this?" Adrian nodded. "Trying to." Thomas gave a short smile. "Good, but don't try too hard. She doesn't need saving, just someone who won't slow her down." Claire turned surprised. Thomas grinned. "What? I've known her for 3 hours and I can already tell." Adrian looked at Claire, and for the first time she didn't look away. They drove back in silence, the sky turning pink with the setting sun. At a red light, Adrian finally said, "What happens next?" Claire thought for a long moment. "Next, I make sure no one else tells our story for us." She looked at him. "Will you help me do that?" He met her gaze, every step of the way. But just as she exhaled, her phone buzzed. A new message, unknown number again. "You should have left the past alone. Now it's coming for both of you." Claire stared at it, and then, quietly, she hit block. But the damage had already been done, because the next morning, when they walked into the building together, the security badge scanner refused to let Claire in. The scanner beeped, then beeped again. Red light. Access denied. Claire swiped her ID badge a third time, each swipe sharper than the last. But the result was the same, a cold, mechanical rejection that stung more than she wanted to admit. Behind her, 2 junior analysts slowed their steps, whispering just loud enough for the words "fired" and "publicity stunt" to sneak past their coffee cups. Adrian was at her side in 2 steps. "It's a glitch," he said firmly, "or someone's made a decision they'll regret." Claire looked at him, her voice low. "This is exactly how they erased her. Quietly, no reason, just locked out." His jaw tightened. "Not this time." He pulled out his phone, tapped the intercom code to the executive floor. "This is Adrian Cole," he said, loud enough for the lobby to hear. "Reinstate Claire Bennett's access immediately, or lock me out too." The silence in the lobby was immediate. Heads turned. The security guard behind the desk straightened like a soldier. The scanner beeped again. Green light. Claire stepped through the turnstile, her chin just slightly higher. Upstairs, Nina met them with a frown and 2 paper cups. "Double espresso for you," she said to Claire, "and a 'don't murder a board member' blend for the boss." "Anyone confess yet?" Adrian asked. "Only the guy in accounting who stole someone's yogurt last week," Nina replied. "But word is, the block came from the board's compliance liaison, under Philip's direction." Claire took her coffee and stared out the window. "He wants me humiliated," quietly pushed out, like my grandmother. "Well," Nina said. "He clearly underestimated your PR team." Claire turned. "We have a PR team?" Nina smiled. "Oh no, I mean Eleanor." It started as a quiet rumor online, a quote attributed to Eleanor Whitmore during a brief stop outside a city gala. By noon it was on the news. "The locket was a gift from my late husband to a woman he wronged. That woman's granddaughter works at my company and will not be erased on my watch." The footage showed Eleanor in her royal purple gown, scarf looped softly at her neck, calm and dignified as ever. The silver necklace gleamed briefly under the lights, because Claire had let her borrow it for the night. The comment went viral. The phrase, "she will not be erased," trended within the hour. Philip refused interviews. Adrian held firm. No comment for now. And Claire? Claire was finally seen. Later that day, in the break room, Claire sat alone, stirring sugar into a paper cup of tea when a voice interrupted her silence. "I owe you an apology." She looked up. It was Danielle from finance. Early 40s, all blazers and sharp heels. She'd barely spoken a word to Claire before now. "I believe the worst," Danielle said, sitting beside her. "Thought you were after something, a claim, a payout." Claire sipped her tea. "I wasn't." "I know," Danielle said. "Now." A beat of silence passed, and then Claire smiled faintly. "You can make it up to me by telling me where the good granola bars are hidden." Danielle laughed. "Behind the protein shakes, third cabinet, but don't tell the interns." Micro-victory, small but real. That night, Claire and Adrian sat side by side on the terrace outside the executive lounge, sharing takeout noodles from white boxes, chopsticks clinking, shoes kicked off. "I used to watch you walk past my desk," Claire said. "Always so polished, so untouchable." Adrian glanced at her. "And now?" She looked at him. "Now I see the man who stood next to me when I was locked out of my own workplace." He nodded slowly. "You make me want to be that man more often." The honesty between them was quiet, but powerful. Then his phone buzzed. He read the screen, frowned, and answered. "Adrian Cole." A pause, then his eyes narrowed. "Who is this?" Claire watched his expression shift, the way tension slid into his shoulders like weights. The voice on the other end was garbled, masked, but the words cut through clearly enough. "The board covered up more than Margaret's story. If you want to know the rest, check the 1973 shareholder ledger. Page 19. The call ended. Adrian looked at Claire, her smile faded. "What is it?" she asked. He turned the phone to her, let her read the screen. Claire's breath caught, because the file the stranger had just referenced wasn't supposed to exist. It had been marked destroyed. The archive room was colder than Claire expected, lined with steel cabinets and silence. Adrian typed the override code into the keypad, and the door clicked open with a heavy mechanical sigh. Somewhere above them, the ventilation hummed like a nervous breath. "This file shouldn't exist," he said, eyes scanning the dim-lit rows. "It was marked as destroyed in a records audit 2 years ago." "Which means someone wanted it forgotten," Claire replied. They moved carefully through the shelves until they reached the CB corporate records. Adrian found the 1973 shareholder ledger in a worn leather binder, spine cracked from time. He carried it like it was breakable. Claire pulled the heavy volume open, the old paper whispering as the pages turned. "Strange," Adrian murmured. "This one shouldn't even exist. It was marked for destruction." He flipped the inside cover, tracing a faded stamp. This copy was held back during the 2019 internal audit. That's why it never went into the destruction box. Back then, the group still operated under the name Whitmore and Blackstone, which later merged and was restructured into what became Cole and Blackstone. Page 19. There it was, one name, written in faded ink. Margaret Bellamont, 3% equity, unlisted, silent shareholder. Claire stared at it, her throat tightening. "She did have a stake in the company." Adrian leaned over. "She must have received it privately. Maybe from Thomas himself. But it was never made public." He scanned the fine print. "It says here, the shares were transferred in confidence, under the condition of withdrawal from employment and non-disclosure." Claire's eyes brimmed. "They paid her to leave." "No," Adrian said slowly, voice thickening. "They gave her silence money and tied it to a contract so it could never come back to haunt the company." Claire stepped back, breath trembling. "They let her disappear, then erased every trace of what they owed her." Adrian ran a hand through his hair, stunned. This changes everything." A soft click echoed behind them. Both turned wide-eyed. The light in the archive shut off. Claire jumped. "Did we just get locked in?" Adrian pulled out his phone flashlight. "Motion sensor probably reset. Hold on." He waved his arms dramatically. Nothing. Claire tried not to laugh, failed, and muttered, "Great, trapped in corporate limbo." "Could be worse," Adrian said, finding the light switch and smacking it. "Worse how?" A soft voice responded from the speaker in the ceiling. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Would you like me to define limbo?" Claire blinked. Is the archive voice activated? Adrian stared up. We spent $5 million on AI for this? The lights flickered back on. Claire burst into full laughter. Adrian looked at her, really looked, as she wiped tears of amusement from her eyes. And in that moment, something inside him cracked. Something careful and quiet and heavy. You're incredible, he said. Claire turned, surprised by the softness in his voice. This whole time, he continued, you've stood taller every time they tried to push you down. You've been brave. You've been true. Her breath caught. You don't have to say that, she said. I'm not saying it for you, he replied. I'm saying it because I need to hear myself say it, because I've been part of this world that hurt you. That hurt her, and I'm done pretending neutrality is noble. She didn't respond, not with words, but something in her gaze softened. Let him in. He walked closer, carefully, no sudden moves. I've never admired anyone like I admire you. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. I don't know what this is. Between us. Neither do I, he admitted, but I know I'd regret it for the rest of my life if I let you walk away before I told you what you mean to me. The silence between them was electric. No kiss, no rushing forward. Just presence, emotion. Two people who had found each other through ruin and restoration. A kind of love born not in sparks, but in truth. They sat on the archive floor back to the cabinet, splitting a chocolate bar Nina had hidden in her desk drawer. Midnight snack, CEO edition. Claire held the open ledger on her lap, fingers tracing Margaret's name. This proves she mattered, she said. That she was part of this. Adrian nodded. And now the world will know it. Claire looked at him. They'll come after you if you speak out. He smiled. Not reckless, not cocky, just sure. Then let them come. The next morning, Adrian entered the boardroom 10 minutes before the quarterly stakeholder briefing. Philip was already there, seated confidently at the head of the long table. I trust you've reconsidered your affiliations, Philip said, without looking up. Adrian dropped the ledger on the polished table. Page 19 was bookmarked. Philip's expression flickered. Adrian met his gaze. Claire Bennett stays. Margaret Belmont's name gets restored. And if the board objects, you'll answer not just to the press, but to every woman who was ever paid to be silent. Philip smirked, recovering. That would be suicide. Adrian smiled back. Then let's die with dignity. Back in her apartment, Claire prepared for her first official press appearance, not as a receptionist, but as the woman whose story changed the company. She slipped the locket around her neck and took one last look in the mirror. But just as she stepped toward the door, her phone buzzed. An email. Subject, urgent, original shareholder ledger, duplicate found. Attached was a photo, a second name on page 19. One not listed in the copy they'd seen. Claire froze, because the name wasn't Margaret's. It was Lucy Belmont, her mother, which meant someone had quietly transferred the shares, and Claire might already own more of the company than anyone had realized. Claire stared at the screen, her breath caught halfway between memory and disbelief. Lucy Belmont, 3% equity, unlisted, transferred from Monsieur Belmont, 1995. The transfer had been executed quietly that year, hidden under layers of non-disclosure. Her mother had known. The shares had been passed quietly, long before Claire ever walked through the doors of Cole and Blackstone. And yet, Lucy had never used them, never mentioned them. She had kept that secret, carried it, like a stone in her heart. The dividends had been deposited into a dormant escrow account, registered only with the initials LB. It prevented any withdrawal, and kept everything off the radar, not for power, but to protect her daughter from a past too dangerous, too messy, too heavy to inherit. Claire's hand trembled as she reached for the printed ledger page on her desk. Margaret's name had been there before. But this changed everything. Her mother hadn't just known the truth. She'd been trusted with it, and she'd trusted Claire enough to let her find it on her own. The next morning, Claire stepped into the boardroom alone. She wore the same emerald green dress from the day it all began. The silver necklace rested at her collarbone, not as a symbol of scandal anymore, but of legacy. Philip Cole sat at the head of the table, flanked by 6 board members. The tension in the room clung like fog. Claire placed the printed page in front of them. "I'm not here to take over," she said calmly. "I'm not here to demand anything." Philip leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Then what do you want?" She met his gaze without flinching. "I want the record corrected." The room was silent. "I want Margaret Belmont's name publicly acknowledged as a founding shareholder, and Lucy Belmont's equity to be recognized. Not because I'm asking," Claire said, voice clear, "but because it's already true." Philip's mouth opened, but Eleanor's voice cut through the room like a warm wind. "I support this motion." All eyes turned. Eleanor stood at the doorway, regal in a deep blue coat, her pearl brooch glinting in the morning light. As the wife of a key partner in the company's early years, and as someone who failed to speak when I should have, I support this with all that remains of my name. Claire turned to her, stunned. "You didn't have to come." "I did," Eleanor said, walking to her side, "because justice doesn't speak unless we give it breath." One by one, other board members nodded, even those who had remained silent for too long. Outside, Adrian waited in the hallway. He didn't ask what happened. He simply stepped forward when the doors opened and took her hand. "Well?" he asked, eyes searching hers. Claire nodded, tearful but strong. "It's done," Adrian smiled. "Then let's make sure it stays done." 2 days later, the company released its official statement. Cole and Blackstone formally recognizes the contribution of Margaret Belmont, a former employee and silent shareholder whose legacy was instrumental to the company's early success. Her daughter, Lucy Belmont, and granddaughter, Claire Bennett, represent a continued commitment to integrity and justice. Dignity is not given. It's remembered. Eleanor Whitmore. The words echoed across business news outlets, social media, and employee emails, but it was the internal newsletter photo that stayed with Claire most. A black and white image of Margaret, smiling gently at her desk, locket barely visible, eyes full of untold stories. Underneath, a caption, "She was here, she mattered, and she is remembered." That night, Claire invited Adrian and Eleanor to her apartment for dinner. She cooked her mother's favorite, spaghetti with butter, salt, and toasted cinnamon bread for dessert. No white linens, no catered trays, just warmth, laughter, and the kind of peace that comes after a long storm. Eleanor sat at the table, lifting her glass of sparkling water. "To Margaret," she said softly, "to Lucy, and to Claire," who carried them both forward. They clinked glasses gently. Adrian caught Claire's eyes across the table and smiled in that quiet way he always did when he didn't know how else to say how proud he was of her. Later, as the evening drew to a close, Adrian stayed behind to help clean up. Claire rinsed the last dish, dried her hands on a towel, and turned. He was standing in her kitchen, hands in his pockets, watching her like she was sunlight. "I'm still not sure what to call this," she said softly. "Me neither," he admitted. "But it's not a scandal," she smiled. "No, it's something better," he said. "It's real." They stood there, inches apart, the city humming quietly beyond the windows. Then, finally, she stepped into his arms. No grand declarations, no orchestral swell. Just the feeling of arriving somewhere safe, of being seen, of being chosen. A few weeks later, Claire stood at a company event, a new tradition Eleanor had started, honoring employees from the past who were never recognized. Claire read aloud from a letter her grandmother had written decades ago. "To the woman reading this, I hope you know that silence is not the same as shame. that your name is your own, even if others try to erase it, that the truth one day will rise, if not for me, then for you. And if you are my granddaughter, I hope you wear this necklace not to remember me, but to remind them. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Adrian stood at the back, arms crossed, pride written all over his face. And Claire? She felt whole, finally. Back at her apartment that night, she placed the necklace, now polished, whole, and glowing with meaning, on her bookshelf. Beside it, she framed a simple page. Page 19, Shareholder Ledger, 1973. 2 names, Margaret Belmont, Lucy Belmont, and beneath it, handwritten in her mother's gentle script, pass it on, but only if they earn it. Claire smiled, closed the frame, and turned off the light. 1 year later, the main hallway at Cole and Blackstone looked different now. Where there had once been framed slogans and performance charts, now stood a quiet, elegant tribute, a wall honoring women who had worked in the company's earliest days, but had never been publicly recognized. The forgotten, the erased, the ones who mattered, even if no one had written their names down. At the center of that wall hung a wooden shadow box. Inside it, a simple silver locket rested against dark velvet. It didn't sparkle, it didn't try to impress, but somehow it radiated everything the company used to overlook and now chose to remember. Beneath the locket, in soft gold script, she was forgotten by many, but remembered by those who mattered. Claire Bennett, Director of Legacy and Culture, yes. That was Claire's new title, not CEO, not Vice President, but the first woman in the company's history to lead a department created for truth, remembrance, and restoration, to make sure what happened to her grandmother would never happen again. Claire moved through the halls differently now, not with power, but with presence. She greeted new employees by name. She still brought chamomile tea to meetings, still laughed at her own typos in company emails. But now, when she spoke, people leaned in, because her words carried the weight of something very rare in the corporate world: lived truth. That Friday afternoon, as she stepped out of the boardroom, Claire paused in front of the mural. Eleanor's name was there now, too. Not because she had been forgotten, but because she had chosen to be remembered for the right reasons. She had passed away quietly just 3 months before. Her final gift had been a handwritten letter to Claire. They will try to tell you that legacy is built in buildings and numbers, but you and I both know it lives in people. Keep building that, darling, and never apologize for walking softly when the world expects you to stomp. Claire had cried when she read it, then framed it next to the locket. Downstairs, Adrian was waiting in the cafe, sleeves rolled, tie loosened, reading the same article for the 3rd time. The woman who changed a company without raising her voice. When Claire walked in, he looked up with a familiar smile. "You're late," he said. Though he wasn't really upset. Claire held up a paper bag. Cinnamon toast and cold chamomile, just like our first not date. He stood, took the bag, and leaned in close enough to kiss her, but didn't. Still, after a year together, that pause between them remained sacred. Their relationship had never been about spectacle. It had been about showing up, over and over, with honesty and presence, and room to grow. "I like our life," she said quietly. "So do I." Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Claire returned home. She didn't hang up her necklace. She placed it in a new box, one with 2 names on the lid. Margaret and Lucy. And beneath it, she slipped a note in her own handwriting. For the next woman who wonders if her voice matters, it does, even when it shakes, especially then. Sometimes legacy isn't something we're handed, it's something we fight to reclaim, piece by piece, truth by truth. And love? It's not always about who saves you, sometimes it's about who walks beside you when the world tells you not to look back. And you do anyway, because what's behind us is what made us strong enough to move forward. The end. What about you? Would you have walked away or looked back? Let me know in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, tap like, subscribe, and rate it from 0 to 10. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay soft, stay steady, and never let anyone tell you your name doesn't matter. Thanks for watching.